Alright guys, here it is, part 3. For better or for worse, I'm going to be attempting to get even better scores with my two-way RTX 3090 SLI setup. I just posted my part 2 video this morning, so thank you all for the feedback on that video. There's actually a bunch of really good suggestions in the comments there, so I'm going to be trying some of those out. But first things first, I gotta tear this beast down. Excellent! iBuyPower wanted to make an affordable custom liquid-cooled desktop PC with hardline tubing. 3 things allowed them to do it in the now available Element CL. First, a custom front distribution plate holds the pump and reservoirs for standardized tube routing. Second, sliding mechanisms built into the front panel and CPU block allow the Element CL to support different motherboard and GPU layouts. And third, specialized push-to-connect fittings save time during assembly. If you want iBuyPower to build you a customized Element CL gaming PC, click the sponsor link in the video description. And I got my little shroud off, so the first tip I'm going to go with is one that's straight from Brian, aka BPS Customs. Everyone go subscribe to his YouTube channel, he's awesome. But he's working with an Asus Strix RTX 3090 vBIOS that has a higher overall board power than these cards. I think it goes up to 420 or 430 watts, whereas these cards are maxing at around, I believe, 380. So I want to plug those in and make sure it works first, but I also wanted to do it one card at a time. So I'm just going to unplug the PCI Express riser from each card, and then I'll do the flash, and then I'll swap to the other one, and then I'll continue. Actually, why bother doing that when I can just do it right here? Oh, that was easy. Should also do this. This is the Asus BIOS version, so it looks like it was successful on the first card. Let's do the other one now. Alright, drivers reinstalled and SLI is working. Sweet! And as you can see, GPU-Z now thinks that I have an Asus card for both. Sweet. So 2 possible issues with this block's mounting. One was that the back bracket here, on the other one I was using as sort of a guide for the amount of pressure I was using, and I had flattened it all the way down to the PCB. This one wasn't tightened down as much. Also, the position of my PCI Express brackets here is pretty important because it determines where the block will actually sit. And this one was sitting slightly high on the GPU. Probably not an issue, but I am shifting these just a little bit up, and that will allow me to make it a little bit more centered. Alright, I think that block is as good as I'm going to get it, so let's move back over to this setup. I think I'm going to reconfigure things a little bit, just shifting so I can get the AC unit as close to the graphics cards as I can. I think that also means I need to drop the graphics cards down a level, so probably going to set them right here. That also means I need to swap out my PCI Express extensions, so Cole, thank you very, very, very much once again for meeting me on short notice and loaning me your PCI Express extension. I'll get that back to you ASAP. So next up, I need to sort of refit this bracket. I think I'm going to go with dual loops this time around. That was another thing that was suggested in the comments, so I think that will work out, especially since I have that kind of double rad configuration already good to go. And then of course I need to rebuild this, the box that has been routing all the air in the right direction with cardboard. So that's still in the planning phases, but we'll see what happens. But one thing I am definitely going to be doing is reversing, well, I think I'm going to have fans forcing air over the cards directly from the air from the AC. And then I might have some fans set up as exhaust, but a lot of people pointed out that the way I had it before, I was blowing air directly onto the cards, but I was also pulling in the potentially more humid air from the room, which was probably causing some of my condensation problems. So really good feedback from the comments, and thank you guys again for all of your feedback. All right, let's move on. strange logistical issues you have to deal with when doing setups like this. These aren't quite long enough to reach down here and set the cards nicely on top of my Stay Spicy box, which would be conveniently close to the exhaust from the AC, so that would have been nice. But I need to figure out either a way to get the entire rig down a little bit to line up better with the AC, to raise up the AC, or I don't know, something in between. But unfortunately my daughter is going to be home momentarily, so I need to take a break from this yet again, so I'll come back to this evening. Alright, it's Saturday now. Let's take a look at what I was able to accomplish last night. So first off was the vBIOS updates, and I did manage to flash both of these with the vBIOS for the Asus Strix RTX 3090, so that should give me more headroom when it comes to the power limit for the cards. Again, these are maxing out at about 370 to 380 watts each, and the new vBIOS should allow me to push up to 420 or 430 watts, and I wanted to get that installed and make sure it was functional before I went ahead with everything else. Next, based on some additional feedback from Jay, he did tell me that he put some heatsinks on his memory for that last test he did where he's getting close to 30,000. I was on the verge of ordering some of those earlier this week, and I didn't, and I kind of wish that I had, but I have sort of an in-between solution here, which is hopefully a little bit better than just leaving them bare. I discovered that on the stock heatsink fans for these cards, there's a square bracket that touches all of the memory modules, so I was able to remove that just with some screws and then sort of remount it here. I did have to cut it because I didn't want to unmount my GPU blocks, and that allowed me to sort of fit it around the edge. And then I do have some of these little MOSFET copper heatsinks, so I just stuck those on. I only had enough to do 7 on each card, so I tried to position them in places where they would most effectively maybe dissipate some heat, so I have no idea if that's going to help or not, but that's my ghetto heatsink mod for the memory. With 24 gigs of VRAM though, there's memory on the backs of the PCBs as well. So these back plates that MSI attached to the Gaming X Trio actually does have some copper pipes back there. I don't think they're heat pipes, I think they're just sort of flattened lengths of copper, but that is again definitely better than nothing, so I had to fish out some screws with some nuts, and I didn't have quite enough of those that were small enough, but I did manage to get at least 3 mounted to each of them, so that should hopefully be putting some pressure between this back plate and the memory on the back. Then hopefully with air flowing over the whole thing, that will keep that memory a little bit cooler too. Finally, I did raise up the AC unit just using some paint cans, and there's a rubber mat that used to be what the dogs got their food served on. And that brings it up so that the exhaust here is going to be much closer to where the cards are actually sitting. I am sticking with these Thermaltake riser cables because Thermaltake said that they did test them and they actually performed better than being just plugged into the board. I don't know if that makes sense. But I am now moving on to reconstructing this box shroud to help funnel the air. I think I'm going to put 2 120mm fans at this side to force air this way, and then maybe do some exhaust at that side. And then I was looking for like a box that could sort of house the whole thing, but I think I'm going to start off with this pretty sturdy piece for the base, cut some holes in it so I can feed these up through the bottom, tuck the bracket over the back of that, and hopefully make that a fairly stable structure in and of itself. Then I can integrate that with some of the cardboard that's still here from the original shroud, but hopefully with a little bit better plan in mind this time to reduce down to the 2 120 fans and then force as much cool air over that assembly as possible. Once I do that, then I just got to get the loop going again, and yeah, I'm going to go with dual loops this time. I do have another pump, and it's convenient that this radiator assembly I'm using already has 2 rads, so I can just use 1 rad for each pump setup. And that's my plan for today, so once again, let's get started. New Shroud V2.0, smaller, more agile. Note that it is not actually attached right now to the rest of the Shroud, so I'm going to build the Shroud around the GPUs after I get the water cooling setup going. That's going to be fed by the two fans that I sort of just taped in there. These are 2200 RPM EK Vardar fans, which are some of the highest RPM quality fans that I have. I did carry over this part in honor of the first builds, but next up, I need to start attaching more on my tubing. I think I'm going to do the pumps over here. Ice chest is right down there for now, and I'm going to be wrapping stuff as I go this time. Oops, I forgot to close that up. I believe that's known as pulling a Kyle at this point, right? That's what he's known for. Alright, both loops are filled, pumps seem to be working, leak check seems to be successful, I'm not finding any leaks, at least not immediately. I still need to build the additional housing around here, and then of course got to get the ice going, but I think I'm going to wait until this evening to do that. For now, a big moment of truth, I'm going to replace the SLI bridge. Now we get to see if this still works. The pump's going. That's a good sign. RGB. Oh, look at that. Nice. Beautiful. System still works. That's awesome. Alright, so I wasn't filming obviously, but this had an adapter fitting on it and it just popped off. So that loop is now empty. Like literally the adapter fitting itself failed. And like, what? God damn it. Emergency refilling this loop. Alright, that loop probably has some salt water in it now, but what can be done? Hey, look, we hit -1. That's something there. That's cool. Power slider can go to 123 now. I'm doing 120 to start. It's running, that's good. Oh, crash. Well, we crashed, but look at that wattage. Now we're up above 460. It's a bit higher than before. think we have a successful run. Oh, that's better than before. That is better. That is an improvement. Temperatures. I was at like 20 and 40 before. Now we're at 30 and 35, 36, 37. So do I need more ice? Clock speeds are looking pretty good though, hovering well above 2,000, all pretty much across the board. It looks like actually my second card is doing better. And I did back off the power limit a little bit that time because I have a feeling that's what was causing the crashes. So we seem to be stable or somewhat stable at around 440 to 450 watts. At last we have another successful run. But that's about where I was at before. Look at this. What's going on here? Now we're hitting 30 on GPU 1, getting up to 47 or 48 on GPU 2. What? This is the one that was good before. I swapped them. Alright guys, it is Sunday morning now and it is time for the post-mortem. I was a little too tired to do it last night, but first off, let's just take a look at the final rig here behind me. There it is, quite impressive looking I think, and for all of my efforts here, and this took, I spent about 3 days working on this. They weren't full days, some of the time was split up here and there, but that's about the amount of time and effort that I put just assembling all this together. And as I probably mentioned, my main goal was to move everything a little bit closer to the AC unit and then focus the air in closer so it would be flowing directly over the cards. My original plan was to extend this shroud out a little bit and have some fans working for exhaust at the back, but I kind of ran out of time for that, so I just sort of zip tied a couple Noctua fans there for exhaust. I think this was pretty effective at feeding the air across the cards, and I even sort of made this custom piece on top where I fed through the cables for the PCIe brackets and the tubing for the returns going down to the radiators down here, which were of course in the ice chest. But there it is, the final setup, for better or for worse, and of course I did a lot of wrapping here to try to deal with the condensation issues I was having. There was still condensation forming. I was able to use the system for longer than before, but I did eventually get some drips down here on this top card, although it's a lot harder to see in there now with all this cardboard around it. Fortunately though, no shorts or anything like that. Really the main major problem that I had was when I finally decided, okay, time to drop the ice in, cool everything down and start running tests. I had this stupid rotary fitting just pop off. It just broke. Not like it popped off the threads, but the rotary fitting itself actually broke, and suddenly my entire loop drained. I had to frantically get down there into the ice to remove the fitting and replace it, and then I had to refill this loop. And that really threw me. I thought I was going to kill my attempts entirely last night, but fortunately I was able to refill the loop and get everything up and running again. That said, I do think I lost some ice down in here, and I think that's one of the things I could have done was have a higher ice to water ratio down in there, but honestly I don't think that would have mattered. But here's the fitting itself, and it just popped off on the rotary part right there. I popped it back on and then I realized oh no, I don't want to treat this as a working fitting, so I taped it so I would know that it's a bad one. Let's just talk results now though. Here's my results from the last video, the part 2 video, 28,256. My score now is 28,363. That's right, all of my efforts in the past 3 days have led to a plus 107 point difference, which is honestly not all that much considering that we're dealing with scores in the 28,000 range. I'm still in third, but I'm still a good distance behind Jay. He is 1,374 points ahead of me with his current score of 29,737. Now, an interesting thing I saw pop up yesterday is this score here from OG 10K Tech, which is old guy with 10 kids tech, and he has I believe YouTube and Twitch channels. And the interesting thing about him is he is doing air cooling still, and he managed to beat my air cooled score by a decent amount with a score of 28,133. So he's actually pretty close to my score here with all of my water cooling efforts. The thing I thought was really interesting about old guy with 10 kids here is he's using Founders Edition cards. So I don't know where he sourced these or if he just paid exorbitant amounts of money for them, but that is a really nice thing to have right now and something that I haven't seen elsewhere on the list. So a very good question still as to how cherry-picked the GPUs in the Founders Edition cards are, and then of course the effectiveness of their coolers. More on that in a second, but just to go over the rest of my results, and I wrote down some notes because my mind is a little fried right now. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. My total board power with the Asus Strix vBIOSes was getting up a lot higher than it was before to about 445 to 470 watts depending on where I set the power limit. So it was definitely successful in raising that, and I think that would have resulted in some higher scores, some significantly higher scores, if I could have paired that with cooler running memory. I don't know how hot the memory was getting. All I know is that it was still getting unstable if I tried to push past about plus 550, whereas with the air cooler on the card, which had much better cooling for the memory, I was able to get up to about 1150. So if we look at the detailed results here, and this is Jay's result, we can actually determine some stuff about maybe next steps for overclocking. His clock frequency was 2205, so he had some really good cooling on there, and his average temperature was only 17 degrees Celsius. So he's also getting really good contact with his blocks, so he has good mounts there with the, I believe, repurposed EK blocks that he's using on his EVGA for the Win 3 cards. So you need both of those, that higher frequency and especially the higher average clock frequency, which you're gonna get by running at a lower temperature, and then you also need that memory clock frequency, and this is, I think, definitely what was holding me back. This is the old guy with 10 kids results with the Founders Edition cards, and you can see he's actually still running his memory at a higher frequency, even the average clock frequency than Jay here at 1332. So I think that just goes to show that we're gonna need maybe some full cover blocks or of course liquid nitrogen, which will cool everything around the GPU as well as the GPU itself because it's down at negative 160 degrees Celsius. But you definitely need both of these things working together to get yourself a high score. We can also see here that he's using air coolers but with AC assistance, so his average temperature is quite low at 42 degrees C. My average temperature for my good run was 29 degrees C, and then of Jay's of course was 17 degrees. My average clock frequency was 2078 megahertz, and there's my average memory clock, 1283. So if this series has caught your interest and you're gonna keep an eye on these Port Royal leaderboards or the other 3DMark leaderboards for people who are doing extreme overclocking, I think there's a few things that is going to help people who push their cards higher than the scores that we already have. First is gonna be that total board power, and as grateful as I am for the use of the MSI Gaming X Trio cards that I have been testing with, their peak total board power is definitely significantly lower than the Asus Strix cards or the EVGA for the Win cards, and that's not necessarily a mistake on MSI's parts. They set the vBIOS to work with the hardware that's in the cards themselves. I actually got an email from Buildzoid last night, and he was trying to give me a few tips to help me out, which is also greatly appreciated, and I still need to reply to his email, but I did read it and take some of the advice, and he was concerned that with the higher TBP vBIOS, especially the Asus Strix one that I was using, that I might blow a fuse on the card or the cards. Fortunately, I didn't do that, but I have to imagine that if I was using Asus Strix cards that were designed for that higher board power, that I might have had better results when it comes to the GPU frequencies. But then of course there's the memory, and you really need to scale up the memory overclocking along with the GPU in order to hit those high overall clocks. I could definitely see that the memory was holding me back and keeping me at a peak in the low 28,000 range. So better memory cooling can be done either with a full cover water block, and hopefully those will be available soon, with actual VRAM heat sinks or memory heat sinks like the kind that Jay used, as opposed to the extremely hacked on solution that I was attempting, which didn't work very well at all. Or of course what we're expecting to be coming next very soon from probably Gamers Nexus and Jay, which is LN2 overclocking, which cools everything around the entire GPU, including the memory. But then of course there's the Founders Edition results as well, and there's a lot of speculation that NVIDIA is keeping the best GPUs for the Founders Edition cards. So I'm really interested to see what custom cooling solutions on the Founders Edition cards are able to do and how much higher those are able to scale compared to the numbers we've been getting here in the first few weeks after launch. I actually wrote a lot of notes. I wanted to cover my problems or the specific issues that I encountered just to have them all here in one place. There was of course that rotary fitting that failed, that really sucked. Then of course there's the mismatched vBIOS with the cards I'm using, and so that can potentially cause issues. It was functional and I did get a slightly higher score, but I have to imagine that if I was using EVGA for the Win 3 cards with the EVGA for the Win vBIOS that had the higher total board power limit, that might have improved things. What really made me decide to take a step back here though was my GPU temperatures, and I think my GPU block mounts, as janky and hacked in and as fun as they were, just aren't really getting the job done. I don't know if those brackets are bending over time or if it's just a matter of not having enough pressure there, but I think that could definitely be improved. With the setup before, I was hitting 20C and 40C, and this time around it did seem like I was getting lower overall temperatures. I was getting down to -1, but I was still hitting 35C and even upwards of 45C on the cards from time to time, depending on the tests I was running. And that definitely indicates to me that I do not have an ideal setup when it comes to the water cooling, even though I split stuff up and did 2 separate loops this time around. I was still dealing with some condensation issues, not as bad as before since I had everything wrapped up, but I was still getting some drips down there, so that was enough of a concern to me that doing this long term or getting extensive testing in was going to be challenging. And then the fact that I have a very customized cooling setup here with the box that I built around the Shroud and everything. I tried to make it sort of modular as I was assembling it, but by the time I got to the point where I had to build the Shroud around everything, I just had to tape it all in there, which means if I needed to do anything like swap the cards to put a different card in the number 1 slot, that was a much more challenging prospect than just taking the cards out and moving from one slot to the other. Mostly though, and it's sad to say this because this is probably the thing that would have been the most accessible for me if it wasn't for the fact that I initially thought, oh no, I need to try to find these on Friday, and then I just couldn't source any over the weekend, is VRAM heatsinks. And I think doing that to keep the memory temperature down would have let me creep my score up there a little bit closer to J. So guys, at this point, as much as I hate to do it, I'm going to be tearing down this setup. And I know a lot of you are going to be saying, wait, Paul, get those VRAM heatsinks and stick them on and do it again. But trust me, that is a lot more difficult than it sounds. And I have been spending a pretty exorbitant amount of time on this over the past week and a half or so, so I need to take a little bit of a break for now, I think, and focus on other things. I am planning to shoot a vlog this week, so if you've just been really interested in the sort of taping cardboard together and all that stuff that I've been doing, I will be covering a bit of the teardown process, so stay tuned for that. Maybe hit the subscribe button if you're not already. And then I'm not ruling out coming back and trying this again in the next week or two. It just kind of depends on how things go and what Steve and Jay do. I might see if I can source some other cards besides the Gaming X Trio cards and see if that does any good. The VRAM heatsinks, of course, is something I could add. Maybe if full cover blocks come out, that would be a great solution for keeping the GPU and the memory cool with ice water. And then one of the other things Buildzoid suggested was really, really high RPM fans, which I don't really have. We're talking 3,000 to 5,000 RPM range like they use in enterprise server grade environments. Those can be really loud, but they have two really good effects. One is they move a lot of air over stuff, so that would really be helpful for keeping the memory cool. And because it's moving so much air, if you're going sub-ambient, it helps keep things dry because it dries off any moisture or condensation that might be forming. I need to say some huge thank yous to all the people and organizations that have helped me out with this project. NVIDIA and MSI, of course, for the GPUs, the SLI bridges, and the graphics cards. Steve and Jay, thank you guys so much as well. It's been really fun joining you guys in this competition. And for any of the little pokes that we've been sending back and forth to each other in the videos, it's all in good fun, and we've been actually talking behind the scenes, and they've been providing me some assistance as well, some tips and suggestions along the way, so I don't think I would have gotten this far without them. Huge thank you, of course, to Cole for coming in clutch with that PCI Express extender, Thermal Take for the blocks and the memory, Corsair, mainly for solidarity. I didn't end up using much of the stuff that they sent, but they still did send me stuff to use. Brian, BPS Customs, I was talking to him. He's the one who tipped me off to the Asus Strix vBIOS, so it was great to be able to try that out. Buildzoid, who totally just reached out of his own accord to offer me some suggestions and advice as well, and then all the people who left helpful comments and suggestions down in the comment section, because I got great advice there too. In closing though, I've had the thought many times recently, which is it's like a quote about like, it's better to have tried and failed than to have never tried at all, something along those lines. I wouldn't say I consider this a fail completely. I am in 3rd place, but I guess I was just hoping to do a little bit more with this final setup here. But if you look at my attempts from a couple of years ago, I was not ready for the phase 1, and this year I was more ready for phase 1 and I did better there. This year I would say I was less ready for phase 2. The water cooling, the ice water cooling, I'd never really done that before, and having some experience there is definitely a huge help. But if we do come back to this challenge in the future, I'm hoping I can build on that, and maybe next time I will do better in both round 1 and round 2, and then maybe I'll give a heavier consideration to continuing round 3 and getting some LN2 and trying that out. But however things go, thank you guys once again so much for all of your feedback, support, encouragement throughout this series. It really has been the most fun I have had making videos in a really long time. If you want to check my store out on your way out, you can do that. It's paulshardware.net. Also linked in the video description. I got shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other high quality merchandise. Thank you guys so much once again for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one.